Welcome back. And so President Bola Tinubu's Independence Day speech continues to elicit reactions, particularly with the positioning of that speech, particularly the achievement of the administration forming perhaps more than half of the speech. You know, many Nigerians are speaking to the positioning of the speech, particularly from the opposition. And of course, we heard some of those concerns during the newspaper review. But what exactly do the youths feel about President Tinubu's Independence Day speech, particularly as it concerns them, when you consider that the president, spoke directly to them with a bit too inspiring when you consider when he began to speak. And of course, he also backed it up with some of the actions that the president said his administration has taken to empower them. So let's have this conversation. And joining us on the program this morning, we have youth advocate for Nigeria, advocate for a new Nigeria, Mr. Peter Aka, who joins us from our Abuja studio. And we also have Elizabeth Agbiti Douglas. She's a project director, Nigeria Youth Futures Fund. They join us from our Abuja studio. Good morning, gentleman and lady. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So naturally, I'll start with you, Elizabeth. Ladies first. From some of the things that the president said yesterday, what resonated with most Nigerians was, the beauty of the speech, but a disconnect with reality. But can you say the same for the deliberate actions, or what seems to be deliberate actions, that the administration has taken, indeed, to positively engage youth? And the president outlined them.
Thank you so much, Bukola, for that question. What I will start off saying, first of all, is that we do need to recognize and applaud the current administration. It's hard to deny that there are all these programs. There's a lot of funds from the government. You have NEL Fund. You have the funds targeted at our service corps members, providing stipends. You have the loans for students in universities. And it's really hard, and very difficult to argue that there's a lot of these programs that are coming out. And it is applaudable and laudable, certainly. However, what I will come out to say is you hear concerns around the process themselves, transparency around the process. So, for instance, the president has come out and told us emphatically that 510,000 students have benefited from 228 institutions across the country. And you are, in the work we do with youth here, hearing quite a few people saying, you are going on the platforms, those who are technically savvy are going on the platforms to try and apply. They are encountering issues. They are seeing information that is already saying, for instance, that shortlisting is going on. There are those who have heard about the announcements but don't even know what the process is. And so I would say, as is always the case with Nigeria, the issue isn't necessarily the abundance or lack of programs, it's the process. Perceptions about transparency, questions about whether these opportunities really truly are open to everybody, are some of the kind of things that tend to plague them. But again, I will say it's hard to deny that, these programs, these opportunities are there, but the questions are really around whether they are equitably distributed. I'll make another point as well. Youth are not a monolith, right? So we've spoken about our young people in universities, who, by the way, are actually a considerable number of our young people. But we have young people who are in rural communities, not necessarily, going on to pursue post-secondary education. You have those who have not even had the opportunity to access education. And then there's another aspect of this to also consider, and I'm glad you talked about economics. There's also the aspect of political engagement, civic engagement, and governance. The Ministry of Youth, it is one of, the thematic areas they are focusing on. But beyond, the passing of the Not Too Young to Run, Act quite a few years ago, when we begin to look at young people's engagement in governance, whether it's in political office or even, just as voices, as we are designing, we're thinking of solutions to problems in the country, there's still quite, there are some gaps there. And I can tell you for free, it's not because we don't have capable young Nigerians. We don't have passionate young Nigerians. We have young Nigerians are apathetic. I can tell you for free that there are a lot of them who are passionate, have solutions, want to engage, and are still, struggling, finding it difficult to, have opportunities. And where they do try and push, they are viewed as troublemakers. Let me wrap up by just saying that, again, it was interesting. We said 15% of the speech was addressed to youth. But our young people, 70% of Nigerians are aged 40 years and under. Our average age is 21, which means that 50% of us are 21 years or younger. So, again, I think there's also a problem with our mindset as a country, where we see youth issues as separate from, the larger national agenda. If majority of Nigeria's people are youth and young people, then Nigerians' issues are youth issues, and youth issues are Nigerian issues. And I think there's a bit of a disconnect there that we need to try and fix.
Interesting points that you have rounded off with there, and I wonder if Peter has, a reaction to that. But in addition to that, Peter, President Tinubu is saying to you, you are the future of Nigeria. Continue to dream big. Do his programs and policies inspire you to dream big, Peter?
No, they do not. And I have had that statement for far too long, to continue to dream big. Thank you for having me, but let us state clearly that once Nigeria stops to glorify mediocre and incompetence in leadership, then we will begin to make progress. Because it is said that repeating the same action and expecting a different result is insanity. As a young person, when I see governance and the way political office holders conduct themselves, my belief is that Nigeria is being run by businessmen, political businessmen who see the country as cities, as customers for their personal trade, and not people who are necessarily viable for good leadership. Because it is unfortunate that 65 years after independence and 26 years after democracy, these are the same kinds of tales we hear. If the president is truly interested in laying or building a country that works for people, it is not about handing out cash or handing out bailouts or whatever to the youth. As my colleague rightly said, the issues of youth are the issues of Nigeria. Youth do not exist in a vacuum. We have families, we have mothers, we have siblings. The strength of every democratic nation is in the strength of its institutions. And we must move away from these plethora of talks about trying to lay a foundation for 65 years. How long does it take to lay a foundation and then we build on it? The strength is supposed to be the strength of our institutions. And when I look at the President Tinubu administration, two things come to mind and I'll quickly tell you. Number one, the action of the president on the state of Rivers State. This is not talking about whether the declaration of a state of emergency was right or wrong, but I want to point out how the institutions are crumbling under this administration that claims to be helping the youth. The presidency woke up and suspended a duly elected governor and swore in a sole administrator before the National Assembly ratified. The National Assembly, that is supposed to be the hallmark of a democracy for checks and balances, decided to ratify with a voice vote and setting aside the necessary two-thirds majority that should have voted. And then the judiciary, that is supposed to be the last hope of the uncommon man, for 6 months was unable to sit and look at how legal or legitimate was the declaration. So across board, in a country that wants to produce a society viable for the youth, we are seeing executive, legislative, and judicial recklessness and irresponsibility. So for me, I think that it is more of talk and less of action. And secondly, the president talked about removing the corrupt oil subsidy. The problem with the subsidy regime in Nigeria that should have benefited the youth was not just subsidy, it was the corruption in the subsidy regime. Can President Tinubu come out and state clearly how much exactly have I saved from May 29, 2023 to today, October 2025? Imagine a British Prime Minister or a US President taking a serious reform as removal of subsidy, and the citizens do not know exactly how much was saved. So if you say fuel subsidy was corrupt and you took it out, and Nigerians do not know how much exactly was saved, where it is being reinvested to, how it is plugged into affecting the lives of the youth and other citizens, then it is decentralization of corruption. We should not be talking about increasing allocation to politicians or governors without accountability. So if there is no transparency and accountability in governance and a deliberate attempt to strengthen the institutions, what are the hopes of the youth or the young persons? The only way that President Tinubu can prove that he truly loves the youth is ensuring that we have an electoral process that is seamless, that is credible, where young people who have the character and the capacity can vie for positions without violence and without being, witch hunted, and get into the system to become the leaders of today, because the tomorrow we are talking about is today that we are talking. So I think it is mischievous to have good talks and then we see direct actions that undermine the integrity of our institutions and the capacity of citizens to live as decent human beings in a democracy.
I could walk through some of the points that the president made about, this administration giving wings or continue to give wings for the youth to fly, how youths are encouraged to, yes, Bukola said, dream big and all of that. But I think it's clear now that Nigeria's problem is youth problem. So we shouldn't maybe separate it. If it's the economy, he's talking about the youth because we're 70%. Again, there's always a lot of dispute about that percentage. If it's security, the youth are also at the receiving end, either on both sides of it. But let me go back to Dr. Agbiti Douglas and speak to what the young Nigerians, again, it's a very tricky one, or what Nigerians need right now. Because for the president, he reeled out a lot of the achievements of his government, how the economy has grown beyond even the projection, balance of trade, the naira to dollar stabilizing and all of that. Why does it seem as though he gives out a lot of things being done, but when people look at it, it's hard for them to pick what is really affecting me? So is it a disconnect between what is being done and what is expected in terms of what is demanded and what is supplied? Is it that people see these things and they choose to look away? What exactly is the issue here? Because I think time and again we've come to this point and we've glossed over it.
Ayo, that's a really great question. And interestingly, I think the president himself answered it when he gave the speech yesterday. He said that, and I'm paraphrasing loosely, that even though, there's been all this work, that they are trying to do, his administration is trying to do to strengthen and build the economy, ultimately, his administration is going to be judged by the quality of education, how safe, we feel as Nigerians, the food that we eat, what goes into our bellies. So, yes, work has been done, but the price of food is still really high. Cost of transportation is really high. Rent prices are really high. So the truth of it is stuff may be given out, but it's not enough. It's not sufficient. And then it also brings me back to a point that we had earlier on about, the president said all hands need to be on deck. But what does that look like in practice? When we were coming up with these solutions, when the administration was coming up with these solutions and developing the funds, was there a co-creation process? Did they sit down with, young Nigerians, with civil society, when they crafted and designed these solutions? Or did we sit down? Because again, as a country, all of us do this. We sit in our corners, we think about what we think is good for Nigeria. And on paper, we may not be wrong, but we are a complex country. There are all these nuances. And at the end of the day, government is there to serve its citizens. So you may come up with great policies that are great on paper, but if your citizens don't feel a sense of ownership or involvement, or feel that it connects with the concerns they actually have, you know, it will be DOA, right? So 510,000 young Nigerians are benefiting from support in schools. But you're talking of 510,000 young people compared to, again, like you said, even if we want to debate the percentage, we'll still use that 70%. 70% of a projected 200 to 234 million people is a huge number, and 510 only begins to scratch the surface. And even of that 510, there's already murmurings and, you know, complaints and concerns about the process and how that is being distributed. So again, what I will say is, as a country, really, truly, if we do want to get it right, the way we develop policies, the way we implement them, has to be inclusive. And I think, again, it goes back to that point of all hands being on deck. All hands being on deck doesn't just mean that we have some of us sat at one level making decisions solely. It does mean that when it comes to decision making, coming up with solutions, all voices, all perspectives need to be at the table and need to be factored into how we design and then eventually go on to implement our solutions. Nigeria's problem is not in coming up with solutions. It's usually, you know, how they are crafted and then ultimately the sustaining and implementing them in the long run. So, I mean, I'll end my response here.
So, you made a significant point earlier that got me thinking that if, you know, the predominant issues of Nigeria are youth issues, being, you know, the predominant number of the population, then why are Nigerian youths not showing up as they ought to in the political space? Because when you consider that the crop of leaders that have ruled in the past rose to national prominence in their 30s or in their 40s. So is it a challenge of not showing up, or is it that the political space is limiting for Nigerian youths? Peter, I'd like you to take that.
Thank you very much. I think the answer is obvious. You know, President Tinubu praises himself as one of the supporters of the June 12th mandate, the MKO Abiola, you know, struggle, which of course was premised around free and fair elections. And today the system has become, 30 years later, we cannot have leaders who will come out and commit to a process that will be free, fair, credible, and peaceful. Do you know that in 2023, in the home state of the president, and this is on record and reported, citizens were physically beaten out of polling units in Lagos State for looking like a certain tribe? And if that is not an issue to political actors and leaders, then there is high-level mischief. It is not about the youth not wanting to be part of it. It is a deliberate attempt at making the process become so violent and become so difficult that not only the youth, even persons of decent character and integrity will rather stay away. And that is why you hear the usual slogan, politics is a dirty game. Today, women are struggling to have, you know, compensated seats in the Senate or in the parliament. Why? Because they believe that the process has become too rigorous for people who are, non-violent or want to maintain a peaceful disposition to sail through. If you look at the entertainment sector, for example, where the youth took charge of that industry and have made a fortune out of something that was almost nothing without little or no support from the government. It then means that given the opportunity, Nigerian youth have proven to be ingenious and enterprising and ready to take every opportunity. But then you see a government that sets a not too young to run bill into place, and then the cost of the nomination form is about 100 million. So you are not too young to run, but you are also too poor to run. So across boards, it is not a matter of just paying lip service to these issues. If President Tinubu is interested in the welfare of the youth, no population will grow by handing out handouts. Since from presidents before Tinubu, even the Buhari administration, we had a Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Hajia Umaru Sadiq. They said we were doing conditional cash transfers. How much and how many persons were pulled out of poverty? The Minister of Finance recently made a pronunciation that almost 400 billion have been distributed to about 30 million Nigerians. And my dear sister and my brother in the studio, how many persons do you know that benefited, or have you received your own share of that? Nigerians will not move forward through handouts. It is through policies that are going to enable persons of integrity and character to get into the system. And that is what Nigerians must insist on. Because as it is today, the National Assembly that should carry out checks and balances have become almost an extension of the presidency. It is the APC town hall where the president is greeted with his political mantra. The judiciary has proven that it has become the last hope of the uncommon man. So it is up to Nigerians to come together, mobilize and insist that the right thing be done, and we, the youth, will not be waiting to be given the opportunity, but take up the leadership and insert ourselves into the equation. And
indeed, the engagement has begun here, but hopefully it continues beyond this platform to other platforms, such that the voices of Nigerian youths can be heard. But we must anchor this particular engagement now, and thank you, Elizabeth Agbiti Douglas, Project Director, Nigeria Youth Futures Fund, and of course, Peter Aka, Advocate for a New Nigeria. Thank you, gentleman and lady, for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And from here, we'll take a break. When we return, we'll seek to understand the issues between Pengassan and Dangote Petrochemical Refinery. Stay with us, we'll be right back.